James Van Der Beek, teen idol, dramatic powerhouse, and one of the most recognizable faces of a generation, has survived what most people in Hollywood never see coming. At 48, he carries the kind of story that doesn't fit neatly into a celebrity profile, because this isn't a story about fame fading or a career stumbling. This is something far more devastating, far more heartbreaking. This is the story of a man who stood at the peak of cultural relevance, only to watch the years that followed bring losses so tragic, so shocking, that no amount of fame could cushion the fall. 5 pregnancy losses, a wife's health crisis, a career that demanded reinvention at every turn, and a cancer diagnosis that arrived when he was finally, carefully, building toward something new. He kept showing up. He kept going. But behind the charm, the self-awareness, and the warmth that made James Van Der Beek beloved by millions, lies a story not glamorous, but brutal. If James Van Der Beek has ever made you feel that a real man can be vulnerable, can grieve openly, can rebuild without pretending the wreckage wasn't real, hit like as tribute to his resilience. This is the story of a boy from Connecticut who became a cultural icon, lost more than the public ever fully knew, and is still standing at 48, scars visible, spirit intact. The beginning was not glamorous, but it was alive with possibility. James David Van Der Beek Jr. was born on March 8, 1977, in Cheshire, Connecticut, a quiet, mid-sized town that sits between New Haven and Hartford, the kind of place where ambition is quietly discouraged and ordinary lives are considered sufficient. His father, James Van Der Beek Sr., worked as a cellular phone company employee. His mother, Melinda, was a former Broadway dancer, and it was from her that the performing gene arrived, delivered not gently, but with full force from early childhood. James was drawn to performance, theater, story, the electricity of becoming someone else in front of an audience. But Cheshire was not Los Angeles. Opportunity didn't come looking for you. You had to build it yourself, piece by piece, with whatever was available. What few people know is that James Van Der Beek's path to performing was marked not by celebration, but by a physical crisis that could have ended everything before it began. As a young teenager, James suffered a serious head injury during a football game, a collision that left him with a concussion significant enough to alter the trajectory of his childhood. Football, which had been a defining part of his identity, was suddenly off the table. The injury forced him inward, forced him toward the one other space where he felt fully himself, the stage. He threw himself into theater at Cheshire Academy and later at local community productions, discovering that performance wasn't just a hobby, it was the thing that organized everything else. He had natural talent and, more importantly, a particular quality that cameras would later love: presence, that ineffable thing that makes an audience lean forward without knowing why. He studied at Drew University in Madison, New Jersey, pursuing a degree in English while simultaneously auditioning for anything he could find. The early 1990s were years of small parts, short lists, near misses. The entertainment industry is engineered to break the will of the ambitious. Most people leave. Most people find a practical alternative and call it wisdom. James didn't leave. He landed a role in the 1995 off-Broadway production of Finding the Sun, written by the legendary Edward Albee. It was not a starring role. It was not a paid career, but it put him in rooms he hadn't been in before, in front of eyes that mattered. And then something shifted. Then came 1998, and James Van Der Beek went from promising unknown to the face on every teenage bedroom wall in America. Dawson's Creek premiered on the WB network on January 20th, 1998. The show was created by Kevin Williamson, the same mind behind Scream, and it was designed to be something new, a teen drama that took its characters seriously, gave them adult vocabulary, and explored the emotional complexity of adolescence without condescension. James played Dawson Leary, a film-obsessed, romantically earnest, occasionally insufferable teenager from the fictional town of Cape Side, Massachusetts. The character was a risk. Dawson was not conventionally cool. He was sensitive, verbose, self-righteous in the way only the truly idealistic can be. In the wrong hands, the audience would have laughed him off the screen. in James Van Der Beek's hands. They fell in love with him. Dawson's Creek became a phenomenon almost immediately. By the end of its first season, it was one of the most watched programs among the 18 to 30 for demographic in the United States. James became a cover star, Rolling Stone, Teen People, Entertainment Weekly. His face was inescapable. His salary reflected the moment. Reports from the era placed cast salaries in the range of $30,000 to $45.00 per episode by the show's peak years. Significant money for a young actor in his early 20s, though modest by network drama standards of the era. But the fame came with complications he hadn't fully anticipated. The world saw a teen idol. The truth was different. James was a serious actor trained in classical theater, suddenly trapped inside a cultural phenomenon that threatened to define him permanently. The Dawson label, sensitive, weepy, the butt of an internet meme before memes were even a formal concept, followed him with relentless persistence. He made calculated moves to diversify. In 1999, he appeared alongside Jon Voight in Varsity Blues, a gritty, energetic football drama that deliberately subverted his wholesome image. The film earned approximately $52 million at the domestic box office against a modest budget, and it proved something important. James Van Der Beek could anchor a film. He was not simply a television face. Dawson's Creek ran for 6 seasons, concluding in May 2003. By then, James was 26 years old and standing at a crossroads that faces every actor whose first major role becomes their defining cultural imprint. The years that followed were years of reinvention, of taking risks, of accepting that the path forward would not be linear. By 2012, he had done something genuinely unexpected. He joined the cast of Don't Trust the Bee in Apartment 23, playing an outrageously self-deprecating version of himself. It was brilliant. It was funny. It demonstrated a self-awareness that Hollywood rarely rewards and the public almost always loves. The show was canceled before it could fully find its audience, but the performance resurrected critical respect for James in a way that few moves could have achieved. He proved he was more than Dawson Leary. He proved he had range, humor, and the rarest quality in entertainment, the willingness to be laughed at. And then the losses came. Quietly, repeatedly, mercilessly. James had married his first wife, Heather McComb, in 1999. The marriage ended in divorce in 2010. He was 33 years old and starting over in the most personal sense. He married Kimberly Brooke in 2010, and almost immediately, life became both the most beautiful and most brutal it had ever been. Their first child, Olivia, was born in 2010, then Joshua in 2011, then Annabelle Leah in 2013, then Amelia in 2016, a family growing, expanding, filling the rooms of a life with exactly the kind of ordinary sacred joy that no amount of fame can replicate or replace. But between those births, in the spaces the public rarely sees, there was loss. Kimberly suffered multiple miscarriages. Not 1, not 2, 5 pregnancy losses over the course of their marriage. 5 times a life was anticipated. 5 times it ended before it could begin. The grief of miscarriage is one of the most invisible griefs in public life, rarely discussed, routinely minimized, frequently suffered in silence by couples who are expected to simply try again. James refused to suffer in silence. In a culture that still largely defines male strength as stoicism, as the absence of visible pain, James Van Der Beek spoke publicly about what his family had endured. He named the grief. He held it up to the light. He said, "This is real, this matters, this is loss, and we are not required to pretend otherwise." It is heartbreaking when a family is asked to grieve the same way 5 times over. It is something else entirely when one member of that family chooses to speak so that other families know they are not alone. Then came 2019, and the losses multiplied in a different direction. In October 2019, Kimberly suffered a miscarriage late enough in pregnancy that James addressed it directly and publicly on Dancing with the Stars, where he was competing at the time. He stood in front of a national television audience, visibly shaken, and spoke about what his wife was going through. Not for sympathy, not for ratings, but because silence in that moment, felt like a betrayal of the truth. The response was extraordinary. Thousands of families came forward. Thousands of people who had carried the same loss in private found permission, in that moment, to acknowledge what they had been through. That is not a small thing. That is legacy. And then, in late 2024, James Van Der Beek disclosed something that stopped the internet still. He had been diagnosed with colorectal cancer. He was 47 years old. The diagnosis arrived, as these things always do, as an interruption. Life was full. His family was large and loud and beautiful. He was working. He was present. And then the test results changed the entire context of everything. He announced the diagnosis publicly in November 2024, with the same unflinching directness that had defined his approach to grief throughout his adult life. He described catching it early. He described the treatment process. He described the decision to go public not as a bid for attention, but as an extension of the same belief that had guided his response to every previous loss. That honesty, offered without performance, has the power to help people who are walking through the same dark corridor alone. Behind the television icon, behind the memes and the magazine covers, behind the charm, a man who has been asked, repeatedly and without warning, to absorb tremendous pain and remain standing. He has remained standing today. At 48, James Van Der Beek is, by every measure that matters, fighting forward. He and Kimberly continue to raise their 5 children, Olivia, Joshua, Annabelle, Amelia, and Gwendolyn, born in 2018, in a home defined by the kind of intentional presence that loss teaches. When you have grieved the way this family has grieved, ordinary evenings acquire a different quality. You don't take them for granted. You can't. His estimated net worth sits at approximately $8 million, comfortable, not extravagant. He has never been a Hollywood excess story. He has been, in financial terms as in personal ones, a man focused on what is real and lasting rather than what is visible and temporary. His cancer treatment, which he has discussed in public forums and interviews throughout 2024 and into 2025, reflects the same attitude. He is not performing bravery. He is exercising it, one day at a time, with his family around him. He remains active professionally, pursuing projects that align with who he actually is, not who the industry wants him to remain. His advocacy for open conversation around pregnancy loss, male grief, and cancer survivorship has positioned him as something rarer and more valuable than a celebrity. A credible human voice, he participates in conversations about men's health, mental health, and family resilience with the authority of someone who has earned every word of it. At 48, James Van Der Beek stands as proof that strength is not the absence of pain, but the decision to remain honest about it. From Cheshire, Connecticut to Hollywood, from 5 devastating losses to a cancer diagnosis faced with open eyes, and through all of it, a family held together not by fortune but by genuine, hard-chosen love. He did not get the story he would have chosen. None of us do. But what he did with the story he was given, the transparency, the courage, the refusal to let suffering become shame, that is the measure of the man. If this story touched your heart, leave a tribute below. Share a moment when James Van Der Beek's honesty reminded you that real strength still exists, that a man can grieve and speak and keep going, that behind the icon, there was always just a person, trying, losing, and refusing to stop.